Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and we got the second of our year-end list, the top 10 best hit songs of 2019. So I've said in the past that this is the list I look forward to making the most. It's populist, it's where I get to highlight the stuff that I like that everyone else has actually heard, but this year feels a bit different. I wanted to chalk it up to the knowledge that I was bucking against the general critical consensus, but I've been doing that for years. That shouldn't bug me. Maybe it was the feeling that I was going to go out on a limb to defend certain songs that in the past I might not have touched, or that seem more notably flawed than others. But again, I've been doing that for years too. Or maybe it's just nothing and I'm just second guessing myself because, again, I'm not really buying that 2019 was an especially great year for the Hot 100. Not the worst by any means, but in comparison with years like 2015 or 2012 that were overflowing with greatness, or years like 2011 and 2017 where the best hits were amazingly strong, 2019 feels smaller, and a fair bit darker too. It was also a year that, like with the worst hits, a fair few of the best required a little bit of time to truly grow on me, or where I might have acknowledged their flaws initially when I first covered them on Billboard Breakdown, but their quality shone through beyond that initial harsh assessment. So, friendly warning, while there are certain songs that you'd obviously expect because I've been praising them all year, there are some surprises spanning from every crevice of modern music, from streaming titans to songs that frankly have no business anywhere near the Hot 100. That, of course, they had to debut on this year-end Hot 100, and starting in our honorable mentions with...
Walk me home in the dead of night. I can't be alone with all that's on my mind.
It was barely a hit, and a blatant retread that's riding off of Pink's charisma and a compositional structure left over from the 2012 indie boom, which kind of makes sense given that Nate Ruess of Fun co-wrote it, and man, you can tell. That being said, it is probably Pink's best charting single since the beginning of the decade, bringing in a genuine sense of anthemic swell that this year seemed allergic to embracing off the auto-tune backing vocals, the matching groove, and the booming percussion that bounces off the guitars with a fair bit of meaty impact. Furthermore, it is a shot of hope. A song that sees a world that's enveloped in darkness and tries to find a flicker of camaraderie within it. Again, for as bleak and small feeling as so many of the hits in 2019 felt, both good and bad, this is a welcome counterbalance. I'll take it.
There's a way I can save you, 'cause I need to be saved true. I'm no good at goodbyes.
Well, alright, fine, it grew on me. But it also came with getting a different side of Post Malone. The cantankerous, spiteful, miserable side of him that made songs like Better Now and Take What You Want. Less whiny and more angry and contemptuous. And as much as the production does feel swamped out, because it is, and Post Malone's yodel still kind of annoys me, and Young Thug can't stay on topic or tone to save his life, Goodbyes, it works because it hits the precise note of bitterness that comes with staying in a bad relationship too long because the sex might have been good, but it sure as hell isn't anymore. And what I really like is that Post Malone doesn't pull any punches. He knows that he's a screw up as often as I've told him. He needs to work on a lot of his shit, and now he's got the dejected moment of not even really being able to break up properly. Factor in some solid atmosphere, one hell of a strong melodic hook, and framing that doesn't require Post Malone to be remotely sympathetic or even all that likable. Yeah, you know what? I'll take it. This works.
And I don't wanna be somebody without your body close to me.
Another song with some questionable mixing that could deal with a little bit more coherence in its lyrical structure that I wound up liking anyway because they hit upon one inspired melodic shift and basically worked every single element of the song to feed into it. And while there are some for which that kind of gets distracting or a little tiresome, to me it actually works because it reflects the dumb blinkered shallowness that runs through the entire song. This is a snapshot of the contentious relationship where there's near constant conflict and probably a fair bit of cheating going on too, but everyone involved is too committed to the bad idea in order to stop it. Set off within that humid bassy murk of smothered guitars and Diplo's squealing keys, and give it to two singers who actually handle this groove pretty well, even if there's no real interplay. You know what, look, it's far from Ellie Goulding's best, but in this year, I'll take it.
I'm the bad guy. Duh.
So I'm still a little bit irked that this was the Billie Eilish song that ruled 2019 in comparison with some of her other hits. But I do get it. The coursing low groove, the razor-sharp balance in between just being kinda dangerous or just taking the piss out of everyone that seems custom-built for meme culture. But you know what? I've always ascribed to the adage that what people say ironically, they'll ultimately believe unironically. And I kinda like that Billie Eilish can revel in shameless being a little bit sinister and off-kilter while daring you to really judge her. Now granted, I think the drop kinda makes that pivot a little bit too obvious, and I can definitely see people being a little bit unsettled by how much an underage girl at the time was propositioning and goading guys who should really know better. But that's the snide clue to this song, because she is always in control of everything she chooses to do, at least with this. You know, it's not her best this year, we'll get to more of that, but I still like this. Good song.
Look what you made me do. I'm with somebody new. Ooh, baby, baby, I'm dancing with a stranger.
Alright, look, if the mainstream isn't ready for emotional oranges yet, I will take the lightweight version instead. And yet, even outside of that comparison, this is still good. A duet with real interplay and a lot of chemistry, a legit guitar-backed groove, some emotional complexity from both Sam Smith and Normani as clearly not being over their partners and playing a little bit for jealousy, or insecurity, or maybe even a little bit of smolder between them. The ambiguity is what gives this song its punch. But I appreciate the spirit of blunt melodrama that makes the song kind of interesting, and backing it up with some slinky, organic R&B. Really great touch. And while we're on that subject...
Nothing feels better than this. Nothing feels better. Nothing feels better than this.
Again, not Khalid's best song this year, but better is everything I want to hear from him. With enough fine details that add a lot of texture. I like the half-drunken giggling that kicks off the song. I like the heavier vocoders introduced into the outro that kind of put me in mind of Daft Punk in recent years. I like the fact that even though the percussion is still really programmed, it feels a little bit more organic against the ebbing pianos, thanks to the more developed knock off the looser bass beat, all against a little bit more distant smolder that comes off in the background that kind of fits Khalid's half-slurred delivery. It is a song that is all about vibe and atmosphere, but going even further into the lyrics and the gentle embers of chemistry he has with this girl that's mostly gone unspoken, it just feels nice. It almost seems a little bit surprised that she's feeling more, as if he wanted it but never really expected it, but that's kind of a nice touch. Again, the more Khalid leans into propulsive, liquid, organic grooves, the more I like the guy, so yeah, more along this line, that'd be just fine.
100 deep when I roll like the army. Get more bottles, these bottles are lonely. It's a moment when I show up, God, I'm saying wow.
Okay, it should be no surprise that this is here, because this is the other side of Post Malone that really works for me. Either completely miserable and angry, or making the sort of dumb, lightweight song where he's actually having some fun against a real groove, which is the big reason I loved Candy Paint so much last year. And make no mistakes, WoW is impressively stupid. From the out-of-nowhere Fall Out Boy shout-out, to how your grandmother probably knows him, to all the Dallas Cowboys fandom. And yet for once, Post Malone sounds like he's actually having fun with all his party flexing. Even a little bit surprised that it's happening against that spare but undeniable baseline. And yes, Post, it absolutely pissed me off initially to see you winning, as I've said at length for years now. But since the writing and hooks have gotten better, and you haven't been that stupid recently, I'm gonna play Live and Let Live, especially if you can actually keep making songs that are actually fun.
Baby shark, do 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 do, baby shark, do 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 do, baby shark.
So I'll say three things. It does exactly what it's designed to do, it's better produced and arranged than it has any right to be, and the Washington Nationals won the World Series. And who said I can't appreciate a good meme now? Okay, so I'll give you a second to type out an exclamation of bewilderment and anger. Your second's now up. Now on to our list proper with number 10. I'll admit the whole idea of a sleeper hit for making one of these lists is kind of questionable. Just because the song snuck up on me doesn't mean it wasn't ubiquitous in the mainstream. And even I would struggle to call it a great song, but going back to it now, it is the sort of song that does a lot more with less. Small stakes but carrying weight. And thus...
She used to meet me on the east side in the city with the sun on set. And And every day you know that we ride through the back streets of a blue Corvette.
I'll be honest, watching Benny Blanco go from where he was at the start of this decade in the club boom to this, a little bit startling, especially as it seems like his framing has gotten a lot more narrow and focused. If anything, this song kind of reminds me a lot of the Chainsmokers track Closer, but done a lot better, pulling out all the curdled and mostly stupid posturing for more streamlined classic romanticism, a reflection of two people who had a genuine fling in their past and yet never really got out of their small town and are now wondering what might have been, or what can still happen. And Khalid and Halsey are really great choices to play off each other. Besides the vocal chemistry, which they have, Khalid has always positioned himself as that melancholic but kind of realistic Gen Z kid who is honest enough to reflect upon a scene like this. And Halsey, hell, she's played this role before, both on Closer and with all the Romeo and Juliet themes that she unsuccessfully crowbarred on the Hopeless Fountain Kingdom. And the production, it's pretty great for this too. A lot of washed out guitars and another sting interpolation of Shape of My Heart, the cheap rattling percussion, the spare pulsating beat, and nothing close to histrionics, which emphasizes that small scale story. The vibe I get is more closer to Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, and while it's not better than that song, the vibe still works. I'll give it to them. Number 9. And here I thought originally this was not gonna stick around, instead becoming one of the biggest charting hits of all time. You know, as you do.
I'm gonna take my horse to the old town road. I'm gonna ride till I can't no more.
At this point, I've talked about Old Town Road so much both on my own platform and on other platforms that there just isn't much left to say. And even today, it feels kind of bizarre that so much hype was generated over a low-key trap country meme song that was riding a 9 Inch Nails sample and featured some of the most inspired marketing and chart manipulation probably in Billboard Hot 100 history. But all that kind of obscures the fact that Old Town Road, specifically the credited remix of Billy Ray Cyrus, it's legit pretty great on its own. I like the juxtaposition between Lil Nas X leaning into his countryside with Billy Ray Cyrus's flex being more stereotypically hip-hop. I like that the song has more twang than the majority of the gunk that Nashville radio shovels out. I like the song kind of leans into its cheap, hard scrabble vibe with the painfully flimsy trap snares where they actually don't really bug me. And I'm still impressed by how many hooks and ridiculous quotable lines are wedged into every corner of the song, especially that Marlboro Man line that adds a sort of heavier gunslinger posture that a song this disposable really does not deserve. And even while I'm of the opinion that both the hype and the construction of this is far less homegrown than it might appear on the surface, it kind of stuck the landing regardless, where even through all the overplay, I never got sick of this. Yeah, I haven't really been impressed by much of anything else Lil Nas X has released, but Old Town Road is a singular, unique entity. And given it so much of pop music, yeah, you know what? I'm happy we have this. Great stuff. Number 8. And on the topic of overexposed ridiculousness that somehow managed to work regardless.
No masterpiece. 10 bad bitches and they after me. One bad bit look like a masterpiece.
I think for as ubiquitous as Migos have been the past couple of years, you might be surprised to realize they weren't all that active in 2019. Hell, with so many imitators, you could be forgiven for missing it altogether, but in comparison with the oversaturation in 2017 and 2018 thanks to Cultures 1 and 2, they were damn near silent. And yet in their collaboration with Mustard, who had a banner year himself and dropping the DJ part of his name and buying himself out of every contract to ensure full independence, hell, they put out one of their best ever songs. And the funny thing is that it's still very much a Migos song, all hyperbolic bragging and ridiculousness, but it goes way more effectively opposite Mustard's West Coast production. Now, part of this is that Mustard has actually developed his bassy grooves beyond the rote basics, while still preserving the sheer catchiness of the blurred over wind-winds in the melody before dropping in the gang vocals for the outro, but he also knows how to chop up that groove to drive emphasis to some of the more memorable lines here, like that flagrantly embarrassing Canada and Tings reference from Quavo, or Offset referencing Talladega Nights, or the fact that the song really is just an extended flex both on you, with even a line about subbing in your girl. But you know what? Unlike the colorless, drab trap production that Migos has got in the past, this actually has groove and momentum and feels generally sharper overall from all three members. Maybe not quite as slyly textured as Stir Fry was, but just as catchy, if not more so. Hell, you'd think Migos would have chased in and cashed in on this momentum, but it does kind of leave me wanting a little bit more going into 2020. Man, that's strange indeed. Number 7. So we're heading into the portion of this list that will be the most contentious. Songs that I would describe as obviously flawed, but stick the landing regardless. And this, hell, it's arguably the most questionable but basic pop hit of 2019. I even dropped many of the same criticisms on it, and yet...
Oh, she's sweet but a psycho, a little bit psycho. At night she's screaming, I'm on my mind.
So I don't expect Ava Max to have much in the way of a career. That debut album is long overdue, and Sweet But Psycho is not really the strongest foundation to build on it, because trying to flip late 2000s electropop by way of Dua Lipa by playing for the cheapest sort of melodrama on the chord structure of Down by Jay Sean, that does not scream sustainability. And yeah, conflation of crazy or psycho with cutesy capriciousness, that's kind of dicey in today's climate, but it's more middle-of-the-road teenage melodrama than any sort of question about mental health. Anyone seriously trying to mine this for controversy is playing the game of Ava Max's promotional department rather than any sort of real cancellation of her. And yet for all that, Sweet But Psycho is a pretty terrific little pop song that revels shamelessly in its shallowness, and it's just coy enough in its back and forth by highlighting the guy is just as much into it. There's no exploitation going on here, and when you pair it with the echoing claps off the bassy swells, the flickers of brighter synth that's a little fuller, a trap breakdown that's actually tolerable, and production that can actually sound pretty huge in a year where everything was going small? You know what, I don't know, maybe it's my fondness for this era of Cherry Tree Records that would pump out this brand of pop throughout the club boom, but for me, this is just sweet enough in order to work. Good luck on that follow-up that'll never happen, Ava Max. I'm looking forward to it. Number 6. And now here's the big one. Ironic we're following Ava Max where any of the discourse around mental health implications felt kind of grasping, whereas here, yeah, punches weren't being pulled. And for damn good reason.
Cause every time I wake up in the morning, I got murder on my mind. AK-47s, Mac 11s, Glocks and 9s and...
First off, let's clear up a few misconceptions. This song was written and released well before the grisly murders for which YNW Melly is facing charges. And yet I'd put money on that thanks to his label strip mining the controversy and questions of his own mental health. This song's success has been driven most out of gawking at what many people would consider true crime. And indeed, that's a bit of what makes this song so unsettling with any degree of deeper thought or analysis. Not only is the blend of melancholic pianos, messy trap crooning, and especially the percussion sounding downright cheap and lo-fi, but the level of blunt, detailed, and unapologetic storytelling gives the track a layer of sick, street-level reality that accentuates all that, especially opposite the alarmingly catchy hook. And you know what, that's just setting the mood. YNW Melly then asks you to kinda sympathize with his paranoia and his loneliness in jail and relatively mundane complaints about women before the shockingly brutal murder is described in the second verse as the sirens wail over the hook and the horns echo over that verse. Now, normally this would be where I would criticize the tonal shift that comes in the third verse, ditching the melody for some pretty by-the-numbers flexing, broken up by some fractured cackles at the end where all the tragedy is undercut, and then when you hear the diagnosis of bipolar schizophrenia, in a sick way, that change-up actually makes sense. If anything, the dark reality of his state of mind and the whiplash transition, it connects exactly how he might see the world in his fractured perspective, deepening and complicating how we engage and empathize with those with mental illness and the art they might create. It's not an easy song by any means, and as much of an anomaly in sound and presentation as any on the Hot 100, it goes there. And you know what, I'm okay with that all the same. This deserves to be here. Powerful stuff. Number 5. And now for something a little more simplistic. Still dark as all hell, but there isn't much of a revel here. Indeed, its odd bleakness in comparison with its release strategy might be the reason it never quite took off or got acclaim like his other hits. And the third of my controversial ones, half because of my long history with these artists, but also because this is not exactly well liked. I mean,
where the fuck should I really even start? I got hoes that I'm keeping in the dark. I got my niggas cross the street living large.
I've long observed that paranoia in the face of unmatched success has been a running theme and subtext in Drake's music for years now, especially coming off of his greatest moment of exposure in rap last year and getting exposed. And while you would argue he came out somewhat unscathed and still cranking out the hits, it's telling that in the aftermath of the Toronto Raptors winning the NBA championship, his team that he's associated so much with, he released one of his darkest and most bleak singles. The sort of song churning in misery and contempt for everyone and everything, even his own position at the top. And paradoxically, it's a Drake song that I actually wound up liking a lot as a result. Which might say more about the year I had than anything, but there is a curt honesty in all of it that seems entirely aware of how ugly the entire track is. It's just owning it for once, instead of the questionable and mixed framing of previous hits that always felt a little bit more self-serving and frustrating than they should be. He's not trying to play the good guy anymore. Almost business-like opposite its funereal sense, the West Coast knock, and Rick Ross's gruff flexes. Again, it's pretty far from celebratory on a song that was released to commemorate unparalleled playoff success, historic even, and it's the most nakedly greedy song I think I've ever put on a year-end list. But for a moment of pitch black, ruthless success and embracing more of that heel turn, Drake just killed it. I gotta respect that. Number 4. And while we're on the topic of graves and pitch black nightmares exploiting them,
What do you want from me? Why don't you run from me? What are you wondering? What do you know?
the fact that Billie Eilish turns this into a hit still kind of shocks me. It might be a sign that the pop charts are now equipped to handle material that's a lot less traditionally safe throughout the 2010s. Because Bury a Friend, it's not safe, or even all that conventional. Half from the perspective of a monster lurking underneath her bed, unnerved that she doesn't seem scared of it. Half from Billie Eilish herself facing demons both internal and external with dead-eyed acceptance. Both an industry that would exploit her but is not truly aware of what they're getting, and then also her own mind which will turn against her or even consume her whole on her own song. And a track like this could be framed as more obviously bleak and imposing, but Billie Eilish, she gets it. She gets the subtlety, doubling down on close overdubs, nothing close to a defined melody, clicking sound effects, fractured screams, and a mix that's all tense, pulsating, pattering bass and nightmare fuel the deeper you drill in. And that's even before the video. This is production and a command of atmosphere I'm more accustomed from hearing from an act like Clipping than a pop star in the mainstream, but Billie Eilish embraces it with a commitment to haunted atmosphere that's almost unparalleled. Its success also gives me some confidence she might have some staying power. If she can get this to chart, who knows what else will come. But wherever she will take us next, well, where will we go? Just gotta ask. Number 3. Oh, this feels weird. This is wrong. None of this makes any sense. How in the nine hells did this happen? Why did this even happen? It wasn't even tied to a proper album. He almost seemed to do this on a whim. Did he just wake up and say, I'm gonna make the most out-of-character song of my entire career, and it'll wind up being among my best?
I saw the light in a sunrise, sitting back in a 40 on the muddy riverside, getting...
The fact that Blake Shelton cut God's Country is utterly mystifying and the sort of one-off song that I can almost guarantee we will never see again coming from him. I said this on Billboard Breakdown, how it barely even sounds like a Blake Shelton song in its comparison to maybe one from like Eric Church, or maybe even a stab into more blues rocky tones. And yeah, it is still kind of distracting how much the hook reminds me of Brand New Man by Brooks and Dunn. But the reason this grew on me so much, it basically comes back to that grim firepower that carries all that southern evangelical smolder, but none of the opulence or aspiration. And that might be the trick of why this works. It reminds me a lot of Take Me to Church by Hozier and framing the darker underbelly of this sort of demotion, where the metaphors are more wrapped in gothic damnation and death, with cavernous bells, brittle acoustics, percussion groaning and sputtering under its own weight, sizzling distortion, the sound of barking cemetery hounds across the bridge, and Blake Shelton given the fiery performance of pretty much his entire career. He's always been a naturally expressive and charismatic singer, but flipping the switch to a much darker mold without forcing any affectation, it's a very different mold for him. Now, of course, the big caveat is that I do get how a song like this can be taken very differently, where all this is sold straight with no deeper subtext, and this basically becomes nightmare fuel that's even kind of bleaker than even for Billie Eilish, for those who are trapped in this world where he might be framed as the enemy. But you know, I had the distance to make this work, paradoxically with the knowledge that Blake Shelton is never gonna double down and make more songs like this with darker intentions. But in the meantime, I don't know, maybe it comes from my natural affinity for this sort of gothic material, especially in country, but I saw the light with this one, because it's pretty terrific. Number 2. It feels odd that I'm talking about this song now. Its moment was more last year than here, and it only got chart success in 2019 thanks to an award show hype that is rarely felt this deserved. It's also the sort of song that will surprise absolutely nobody that's this high on my list, especially given its pedigree. But I won't deny that it's already becoming a staple hit of the 2010s, and for once, very deservingly so.
I'm of the deep end, watch as I dive in. I'll never meet the ground.
By all accounts, Shallow is a sort of easy critic bait where it should be no surprise that it walked away with an Oscar. Lady Gaga's been gunning for this level of success for years now, especially in her long-running transition towards more rootsy material. It's a slow-building power ballad that actually earns its dramatic payoff with terrific chemistry between the leads, and then embodying the give and take of the thematic core of the film. The old roots rock and Americana of the past versus the pop of the future, coded masculine and feminine in turn to show how they can actually meet in the middle, which reinforces the love song text. And you know what, I gotta give a lot of props to Bradley Cooper for sounding very credible opposite Lady Gaga, but still allowing himself to get blown out of the goddamn water by her. By the time she just opens up on the bridge, the song seals both the danger of the deep, but the risk required to get there and how they're both doing it. Now, even with that pathos, and the fact that the crescendo is extremely well executed and through some pseudo-live elements, they double down on the fantastic scene from the film, probably the best scene in the film. There are a few nitpicks I'll make, how a third verse or a more developed bridge might give this a little bit more, song feels a bit underwritten, and how a few of the guitar tones don't quite have the body I love of truly spectacular power ballads, put this among the best of any given year beyond the hits, and how the reverb feels a little high on Lady Gaga's singing on the hook. But in all other counts, look folks, if there is a song I can see having staying power in the cultural memory into the 2020s, it's gonna be this one. Although what it might mean for Lady Gaga's career going forward, well, I hate to be this cheesy to directly quote the song, but I think we're far from the shallow now. And finally, number 1. And now we got the top spot. Obvious pick for me, I'd argue, but I think on the list full of surprises, I'm allowed to make one that makes sense. The sort of ballad that could easily make my favorite songs of 2019 thanks to its stunning beauty and real complexity and subtlety. But more importantly, when you got a flicker of hope for the future this striking, it's best to nurture it, best to praise it, even when the party's over.
I could lie, say I like it like that, like it like that.
It's funny, this song might be the most obviously conventional track on When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? But it's a moment that's so emblematic of Billie Eilish's talent and poise that I gotta praise it regardless of how poorly it was placed in the Riverdale Season 3 finale. No, what makes this song so striking is its command of emotion and tension and atmosphere. Despite what may be perceived as a more melancholic song, Billie has always described this as being more angry than explicitly sad, which makes a lot of sense when you consider how much this song will balance out. The delicate vocals and fluttery pianos that know precisely the right moment to ascend balances against the quaking layers of bass that slide in precisely beneath them, add a little bit of instability, and moments where she knows that she's on the cusp of shredding this person who's treating her like shit even despite what she's giving him. But the genuine tragedy is that she knows any fight she puts up will never fully satiate that sense of frustrated loneliness on her own, but she's lost the ability to fully even lie about it. There's a feeling that she genuinely cares for this person that's given just enough air and space to realize the tragedy of this falling apart, and that level of understanding of the emotional drama with such fine control while still feeling raw. There are precious few artists who can deliver that convincingly, and at her age, Billie Eilish did it. And while I can never guarantee if her moment of success will herald a decade of further fame and fortune for her or just to flicker out in a year or two, this is her best song to date. It's easily the best hit of 2019. So you know what? Let's see where 2020 takes us all. I really can't wait. But beyond that, if you'd like to get on the journey with me, if you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be very grateful. Please also leave your comments on what I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or hey, if you guys are curious what your list might be, I do read through those, so I'm kind of fascinated to see how my controversial picks will stack up with yours. Beyond that, hey, if you guys are looking for other videos, or maybe want to hop on board my Patreon in order to maybe subscribe or see a little bit more with what I'm going to be doing for my schedule in the future, links in the card, right over there. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.